I'm W.T. Edmondson, and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, we've been having a conversation on the church, the black church in particular. As we think about what is going on in society today, there is a need for a more voice. There is a compass that moves back and forth, and I think much too often we wait until it gets to the extreme, either the right or the left, before we say we have to come back to the middle. So in order to do that, there has to be some conscience, some fabric of decency and respect that is lacking in today's society. And so we've been talking with Reverend Adrian Hendricks. He's the pastor of the Joshua House Church, and Reverend John Nelson, and he's the pastor of Soma Community Church here in Jefferson City. Again, thank you for accepting the invitation. We've had a nice conversation.
Yes.
Let's dig into a few more issues. As we think about where we are today, Adair Banks said the black church was struggling to reach a new generation of advocates who may not attend service. In a statement responding to Black Lives Matter campaign, Young Adults African Methodist Episcopal Church urged its members to find a way to connect with young adults who are not in our churches and to address their needs. Let us not become so comfortable in places and spaces of privilege, as our privilege is only of worth if it serves as a platform to challenge the status quo. The Huffington Post quoted some young people, young advocates, who see the traditional black church as being too close to the white power structure to be helpful. Unpack that for me.
You know, I think some of that is really looking at the church and some of the places at the church, but not just the church, but leadership has failed the next generation. And so when you say that the church has been too close to white power structures and so on and so forth, there's several different types of things that have come really to undergird that kind of perspective. And so in my mind, there are some places where the church has just got along to get along. There have been some critical places, even in the civil rights movement. You know, there's always one. You know, there's always one in the group. There's always a Judas next to Jesus. There's always one that's going to undermine the placement or the mission or the real purpose of effecting change. Now, we can't discredit the whole for the one. And so I think in some ways, of course, the media spins and the way that people view things and the way that you get attention is to degrade and focus on the one. But let's look back at really what the church has had to deal with now as a new modern generation. Church used to be in a centralized community, right?
Yeah.
We didn't have cars. We didn't have the ability to go out into other communities. You had to stay in this one area with this one church. You didn't have cars, so that was your community, that was your life. Now you have the freedom to live wherever you want to live. You have transportation. You can go wherever you want to go. It has some very real barriers to engaging the next generation, and space and time is just one of those basic things. But the church has had to deal with. That's why the church has moved into a social media market. It's moved into an internet market because that's where the people went. Right. And so to me, it's not a new challenge. It's the same old challenge, just reshaped. We've always had to go where people were. We just had them right here. Now we have to do other things and look in some other ways to address them and to move into the area. What do you think?
Well, I would jump right on board with what he said and kind of go a little bit further. Historically in the church, it has always been a young man's game, period. And you look at Martin Luther King, when he first took the pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, he was 26 years old. Yes, he was a co-pastor along with his father, but he was 26 years old. There are so many older men that have been pastors for years that have not passed that baton on. And if it wasn't for Martin Luther King's father passing that baton on him, and then I don't know if you've ever been to Ebenezer Baptist Church, it ain't big. It is like every other missionary, small Baptist church I've ever been in my life. It smells the same. I think they have the same pew maker in all of them. It's the exact same.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and when you go down there, it's a humbling experience. But when you're there, you realize there's nothing much to this church. It's a corner church that empowered a young man to go change the world. You see, and what we fail to do as a church is empower young people to do it. Look at the disciples. They were teenagers, maybe the early 20s at the most. They're not that old. Matter of fact, the only two in the Bible that paid taxes, to pay a poll tax, you had to be over 18. To pay a poll tax, actually it's over 16, excuse me, were Peter and Jesus. So the rest of them had to be younger than 16 at the time. Okay, so like you look at this historically, it's always been a young man's game. And we have to empower our youth to do things. And what happens is when we empower our youth, if you look at where Christians have done really well, we did really well in radio. Now, you look at that, not many people listen to radio anymore that are in younger generations than us. But radio is where we did really, really well. We kind of jumped on TV, but didn't jump on TV. We left the internet alone because it's filled with porn. Instead of jumping on the internet and saying, let's get something, how many churches do you know that are on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram? How many of them are doing a Facebook Live discussion? You know, so what we miss constantly, and what these Black Lives Matter advocates are saying is, you're not where I am. So you can't speak to me. I'm on Snapchat, and let me tell you what's going on right now. And so part of what we do in our church is we say we're a multi-generational, multi-ethnic church focused on the next generation. And so my whole goal, knowing, you know, both of us have a lot of college students in our church. We know in 4 years they're gone, or less, depending on where they're going. And so my goal is to train them to be deacons and elders in their church before they go out. That's my goal, is to train them up. We know that. And if you're over 25 in our church, we're going to train you to train them, because they're the next generation. If you want these social ills to change, they have to catch the vision of what the gospel is and be empowered to use it in their instance. One of the examples, and I'll end here, is I was on campus, and this young lady came up to me in the caf and asked me what one of the points of my sermon was. Now, we're not a large church. So I looked at her and said, you weren't there Sunday. How do you know? Oh, well, this young freshman man's putting your stuff on Snapchat, so I watched your sermon there. Oh, I didn't even know. So my sermon was being broadcast, and I didn't know it. You know, I don't have to get all the camera equipment and do all this other stuff. Literally, there's a dude with a phone on the second row going like this. That changes everything. Well, now I've reached her in a way that I didn't know I could, and this young man did it for me. So now we're empowering him to run with it. Hey, bro, go, do your thing. But we have to be willing to take those chances. And here's the thing. With those chances, sometimes it hurts. But those young people, if they're willing to be along with those who are older and wiser, can do some great things. And we can speak to the Black Lives Matter movements, which I think we should. We can speak to a Huffington Post, and we can bring moral clarity where they don't have it.
You know, this makes me think of another point. The effectiveness of the church, really, again, you're still going to come to a racially based issue. Most of the churches, black churches, are ran by bivocational pastors.
Yes.
This means that they have to work 2 or 3 jobs.
Yes.
The church is not their main strength of income for the family or the home. Even when we had centralized communities that were able to support the church, maybe that was a better deal.
Yeah.
Now, no, that's not the case. Most of the black churches, the pastors in this city, there may be 1, 2, maybe, pastors who don't have other jobs. I think there's only 1. And so, again, they're bivocational, and to have, to be stripped from an economic base to support the work becomes a problem. And then where do you get the job? Because the job market is run by those who assimilate with themselves. And so you have to be entrepreneurial, or you have to do multiple low-paying jobs. So you talk about the effectiveness of the church. I could do a whole lot more if I didn't have to go and spend 30, 40, 60 hours at my other job, and then spend another 20 hours at my other hustle to make sure that I have the 20 hours to do ministry. And so effectiveness definitely has some economic strains on them, that if we had an economic power base, or if we had a way to develop the kind of support so that our leaders could lead. And so our leaders don't have the ability to lead as they could lead because they don't have the finances, and we don't have the social support, we don't have the relationships. And so again, you're talking about, you know, one thing that impacts the other that impacts the other. But if we had a base, if we had the kind of community that sustained our leaders and gave our leaders the ability to do what they need to do, to have meetings like this, to bring real relevant discussions to the table, but not just discuss it, put a plan together and then organize to implement a plan, you would see communities that were more better off. They would have an agenda for what they need, from job basis to, you know, health care issues to policy issues. All of those things would be on the forefront because we wouldn't be diverted or divided. And so those kind of things, they hurt us.
And can I also say that a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement and people that are in that movement are speaking out of hurt. And I mean, let's just be honest, there's no hurt like church hurt. There's no hurt like church hurt. Somebody, you know, every person I've ever met, every young black man, every young black woman's got a deacon, a bishop, an apostle somewhere in their family. Everybody's connected in that way, right? So we all have that. So why aren't you here? I mean, the black community historically has been very adept to the local church. The reason why is because there's some type of hurt. And so there is repentance on our behalf as the church and as leaders in the church that we have to do. As we call our white brothers and sisters to collective repentance of sins past, we have to be able to do the same in order to empower our community to continue moving forward. And just identifying that as a church to say, yo, this has hurt you, and I'm sorry. And I wasn't there, but I'm sorry for that. And let me work to regain your health, because I think you're talking, we're doing a series called Generous Givers in our church. And I know as soon as I get that, we're going to lose people because they're like, oh, he's after my pocketbook again. Well, there's church hurt there. Well, why is that there? And for us, that's a discipleship issue that we can begin to walk them through. But for a lot of people, they're gun shy because something has hurt them in the past, and being able to recognize that is really paramount.
Last point to this, there's also the continuation of a moral decay in our society. And so, you know, not just everything is, in my mind, is the church's fault. There is a moral depravity that has continued and will continue in our society, and what we call community. That idea has changed in your lifetime. Definitely has changed in my lifetime. You know, when you think about being able to leave your kids out in the neighborhood, I mean, out in front of their own house where people are driving by and snatching little girls. I was just in Jamaica last week. All over the world, they're stealing kids, the human trafficking. These issues represent a moral decay in our society. And so there are much, much more issues than just the dysfunction of the church, but there's a dysfunction in man, and that's what Jesus came to correct.
As I was preparing here, I came across a statement. Reverend Melvin Russell, he's a lieutenant colonel of the Baltimore Police Department, said that there are several reasons why the black church is not more vocal on social justice issues. The disintegration of the centralized black community has diluted the economic and political power. You spoke to that a few minutes ago. How has the decentralization of the black community diluted the power base of that community?
You know, WT, we can make great decisions when we're informed. We can make great decisions when we are connected, when we have shared dialogue. Because we are decentralized, we don't talk to each other as much. Most of us, you just check your own life. We go to Facebook for our news. We go to social media for our information. That is the only platform that we find to be connected socially. And so the nitty-gritty of human interaction, to know a person, we used to have dinner at each other's houses. We used to share real space so that I really understood who you were, what your children were going through, and when you had a problem, I had a emotional connection to you to help you solve your problem. That decentralization has caused us to lose that human connection, and social media cannot replace human touch. It cannot replace that human dialogue, and so yes, it leaves us to be scattered. It leaves our voice to be diverse. But even when I think about this, I ask the question all the time: name me outside of Barack Obama, and I wish, I wish that President Obama could take the helm of leadership for black community and black issues and do something with it. I wish that was his agenda. But who is leader?
Right.
Who is leader? Who are leaders? Who's leader in our state? Who's leader in not just our country? Who's leader in our communities? And so that question about, you know, how we are decentralized, to me, has several facets. One is where is the definition of leaders, and how are they endorsed? How are they presented?
Right.
How are they succeeded? And so, you know, you spoke to the generations of elders not giving that space to the young next generation. That's a problem.
Yeah. And when we don't do that, we don't allow them to make mistakes. You know, again, go back to the word I used earlier, that phrase of chronological snobbery. Martin Luther King made some massive mistakes, some massive mistakes in this way. And if you look at it, again, we like to look back at it with rose-colored glasses and go, oh, it was amazing. There's some massive mistakes that happened under his leadership. But because of that, he was able to learn. Because of their interactions with SNCC and other organizations, they were able to learn and grow and change. And it made them smarter, and it made them wiser and politically savvy. But it's being able to hand that baton on and say, okay, I know you're going to make mistakes with this, but I'm willing to let you do that. And that is an amazing thing. The decentralization of the community is something that hurts overall, and it hurts in so many different ways. My mother and my grandmother both went to Lincoln University. And so when my mom came, when we moved back to Jefferson City, and we were walking through Jefferson City, and she was saying, oh, this used to be here, this used to be here. So we're going down the foot, and she's like, oh, here, here, and here. And my uncle and my grandfather both own shops up in Columbia. And so when we went there, oh, now it's all a parking garage, but this used to be here, this used to be here. This is all the center of the black community. We all stayed here. Our dollar was throughout here. You know, and I ask the question all the time around Lincoln, where's that place? Where's that place that you're going to remember when you come back as a grad student? Like, I know what my mom remembered, but what's that place you're going to remember? I mean, when I went to Kansas State, we had a pizza shuttle where you literally had to drop the pizza on the ground and had so much grease on it within the box. It's nasty. But we all ate it. You know, it's that place that everybody knows, right? What's that place here? Where are those places that we all hang out? I mean, I guess McClung Park, maybe? And see, what happens is... Right, yeah.
On the blacktop.
We miss that community. Right. And because we miss that community, there is no centralized place. The only two places historically in our community where that's happened is the barbershop/hairdresser and the church. Those are the places that it's happened. We don't have that many barbershops. We need more. And the church, for some odd reason, isn't centralized enough to come back together. And it's hard for us, especially going back to what Pastor said earlier, when so many of us are working multiple jobs. Well, for me, I'm fundraising, right? So like when we're trying to work all these different, so we don't have the time, because our call is to be daddies and, you know, and be at home and husbands. And so we can't be everywhere at all times. But if we can find a way to come back together, to be in the community together and work as one, there could be some beautiful things that happen on the seaside side of Jefferson City and every community around the nation.
But wouldn't you think that this is the primary issue in every city?
Yes.
Every city that I've gone to, every conversation I had, I'm with the Ecumenical Leadership Council, and we look at issues in Missouri, from Kansas City, St. Louis, to Boot Hill, Jefferson City. We have every black community in America has similar issues. Decentralization, economic issues, having a lack of support, the leadership, you know, vacuum, even the idea of what that would look like from the absentee father, you know, where we have not groomed our men to lead our young men and prepare them for, because they're not in the home.
Right.
and they're not in the home because they were trapped in a community that had no options for employment, and so crime became the next best thing for getting their needs met and possibly meeting the needs of family. So now they're in jail. And so this is systemic issues that have to be dealt with. These are issues definitely that we have to speak and have policy, even amongst the, what's the black code now? Yeah. What's the code for a thriving African American community? That language needs to be shaped by our leaders and expressed throughout the nation. And I think Tavis Smiley and Claude Anderson and others have looked at having an empowerment plan. They're doing it in Atlanta. We need those things right here. Yeah. And we need those conversations here to really look at how do we take the next generation and give them a better platform than what we had.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about what has been happening in this nation for years, but Ferguson brought it to light. Mm-hmm. The past few years, law enforcement has been in the forefront. Numerous shootings of unarmed black men. That has captivated this nation. Looking at the faith community, has the faith community spoken to this dilemma in the manner that you think it should? The Black Lives Matter says basically that you've had your chance, you didn't do a good job at it.
Right.
I don't want to hear nothing you have to say.
Right. Yeah.
There's a problem with that, but I can understand. What do you say?
Again, the game ain't fair. It really isn't. I don't think that when Ferguson happened, I don't think that there was a black church who wasn't speaking to this issue.
Right.
Everybody had a problem. Everybody was emotionally afflicted. Everybody wanted to bring a voice to the discussion. Mm-hmm. But who gets camera time? Who gets endorsed by media? Mm-hmm. We own no stations. We have no platform to say this voice is going to go out to the nation. This dialogue is going to go out to the nation, and it pushes the culture and society to see from a certain perspective. Y'all don't have nothing to say. I didn't see you on the news. I didn't see you speaking to the issues. Right. You weren't on CNN, and so now we in the street, and the voice came out of the street because CNN was on the street. They didn't visit the church. They visited the street. There was no structure in place for the church to have voice that CNN and NBC would come and check to see what the voice of the church was saying. And so the game ain't fair. Mm-hmm. But it is to say there's an opportunity for the church to be more intentional about how to get its voice out. Now, how to do that, still an economic issue. How to maintain and sustain that is still an economic issue, but it's an issue that must be addressed. And so in my mind, did the church drop the ball? Not necessarily so. Is there some work that we need to do to make sure that our voice is unified, that our thought is clear and is getting out to the people that it needs to get out to? Absolutely.
The church, let me go back to my Black Lives Matter brothers and sisters. They're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And for years and years, the church has been speaking to this. Like my brother just said, nobody's been listening. We can speak all we want. You can speak to you blue in the face. But if nobody's listening, it doesn't really change anything. And so it goes on both ends. It's us being willing to adapt to the media in order to find a way to get our voice out there. And also the people that are in power being willing to listen. But it's a both and. But we've been speaking the whole time. And there was a case in St. Louis before Mike Brown that just got adjudicated, right? So that was already being spoken to already. And then also, again, I keep going historical because I think it really matters. When we forget our history, we forget what's going on. But when you look at the black community, we've never had a great relationship with law enforcement. My father's a law enforcement officer. We've never had a great relationship. Go to the 13th Amendment, move forward. Why were the police forces designed? All these things moving forward, when you understand them, you understand it's never been a great relationship. And so the black church has always spoken to this. And being willing to have those community forums and sit down and say, this is what's going on. And there's so many times I've sat before the mayor, I've sat before the superintendent and said, do you know this history? And they look at me and go, no, I had no idea. Well, you need to. Here's a book. Go read it and come holler at me, right? Like, let's get back together and talk again, because I need you to understand why this is a thing, why I have to give my son the talk.
Right.
Right? Like, why, when I got pulled over the other night and he's asking, why are your hands on the wheel? Why is this off? Why my father, who's a law enforcement officer, taught me those things, right? Like, there's because there's an intrinsic distrust. But what happens is my brothers and sisters in the white community start from the position of you must trust, but they don't ask why, right? There's not a why. Why do I distrust, right? And so why does my blood pressure go up? Why does that happen? Well, let me tell you why it's happening. And when we have that conversation, you can begin to understand. And so I understand why people get frustrated and go, the church isn't doing anything. Well, no, the church isn't doing it the way that you would want to do it. But we are doing something, and ours is always the long game. It's always the long game. As a matter of fact, if you want to call it long, it's the eternal game. We're looking for the eternity. We're looking for souls, we're looking for sanctification, and we're looking for salvation. That's what we're going back to. And so when we look overall and go, oh my goodness, you're not being loud enough, you're not being boisterous enough, well, there's a time and place for that, but there's also a time and place for us to speak truth to power, which we've been doing for years.
Another thing, and I love it, my father was in law enforcement as well. I have two sons that are growing up in this society. I have to have the talk. I have to tell them everything from how to sit in a car, how to drive by the police, how to be in a place that is a social place. All of those things, I have to show them and tell them exactly what's up, or it's a problem. And so for me, when I think about the church's involvement, a part of that is we have to train our people, right? You have to train them on how to engage in the church world and in society. It's a double job. You have to train them how to be effective in the church world and in society. You got to train them on how to speak, how to answer the phone, how to fit in the church world and in society. And it's hard out here.
Why do you think the Black Lives Matter mantra, that slogan created such venom?
Yes it did.
What was that about?
WT, when you have a statement that in this world has pushed up blackness, that has given validity to blackness, black lives, black life, black culture, and black community, in a world that has historically, vehemently opposed black leadership, black placement, it is disruptive. It is threatening. I've thought about that. Here we are as a people around the world, hospitable. Here we are as a people around the world, willing to embrace relation and dialogue and culture, willing to open our tables and share our food, and so on and so forth. We've always been those kind of people. And so, our experience, what we've received back, has been to push away, to stay away, to not touch, to not engage, to not give trust, to not give space. So something is inherently wrong with that. And so the Black Lives Matter connotation was so strong and so concrete. It was so clear. These lives matter. And the way that it was, in my opinion, the way that it was spun in the media, basically saying, well, if black lives matter, then you're saying blue lives don't matter, white lives don't matter, but which is, we know that's not what it was saying at all. We were giving attention to the issue, and the issue was black life was being extinguished at a higher, more venomous rate, with a seemingly, a spirit behind it, an attitude behind it, that said that it was meaningless. And they wanted to give voice to that, to say, no, it does have meaning. And we are going to stand here and let you know that that meaning will not be forgotten.
Yeah. I think for, a lot of my conservative friends added a word, either at the beginning or the end, only or more.
Right.
And because they added that word somewhere in their head, nobody's ever articulated it, but because that word was added, it then shaped the whole narrative. And you missed. And what happens, and I see this so much in conversation, my white brothers and sisters speak with an individualism. I heard this actually from an Asian friend of mine. He said, my white brothers and sisters speak with individualism. We talk about racism. I didn't do it. I didn't own slaves. My family didn't do it. You know, it's an immediate individualism, which is a function of privilege. Minority communities in the United States, we speak with a collective. We speak on, you know, as I told one of my white friends the other day, you've never been asked to speak on behalf of your whole race. I have. Ever. Yet I am all the time. Right? So, and so what happens in the conversation is we miss each other. And so black people in this time are saying, hey, our lives matter, if we want to add a word, too, you know, also, we want to add that word. And what the individualistic heard was, well, only your lives matter, so you don't value mine. And because of that, we've missed each other over and over in this conversation, instead of being able to interlock and go, okay, why do you say that? Well, let me give you the history behind why I say, why I know my life hasn't mattered, and why it should matter now, and why the Imago Dei of God really matters in this moment, the image, that you're an image bearer of God. So that's why we all matter. And you would believe that too if you heard me. But you got to be able to hear me and lament with me and cry with me and know, like when Terrence Crutcher got shot, I had a friend of mine who lives in Portland, Oregon, called me and said, he's a white friend of mine, called me and said, I don't understand, I don't know, but I know you're hurting. How can I pray with you? Bro, that meant the world. That meant the world to me. To understand that I had a white brother who doesn't get it, but understood enough that I'm hurting that he's willing to weep with me. There. That's what I need. But until we get to that point where you can actually empathize with me, not just sympathize on behalf of me, we're going to keep missing each other.
And what's amazing in all of this, all we want is the same thing that you got. Yeah. We want to be treated fairly, like you. We want to be respected, like you. We want the same equity. We want the same opportunities. We want to be human just like you. And so that statement says we are, whether you acknowledge it or not, we are human. We are these people. We matter. And our lives is not a mistake. We're not an accident to the world. And so I don't understand how people get so confused about it. Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, sometimes, you know, we classify this as white privilege, but sometimes that perspective allows you to not think through it or see it enough. Yeah. And so they dismiss it.
Wrapping it up, a number of weeks ago, there was another mass shooting inside a church. It appears that it doesn't matter the degree of mass casualty that comes out of these shootings. It doesn't seem to matter to the power to be that said, I can make reasonable alterations to the law to try to address this issue. But the Second Amendment is saint, okay? We can't touch. The NRA is so strong that they have impacted both Democrats and Republicans. And as a result, people are dying every day. Mass shooting in Las Vegas. Nothing. When individuals target the church for mass killing, and our lawmakers do absolutely nothing when every Sunday morning, most of them are in somebody's church, and they do nothing. Speak to me.
Yeah.
It hurts. It hurts. It hurts me. You know, when I saw the Vegas deal, when I saw the shooting in Texas, I just could not believe. And maybe that's the problem. The problem may be me. I have a sanctity. I have a position in my mind for where God's house is. It's untouchable. It is holy. It is a place where love and community is supposed to have freedom. It's supposed to be, I'm saying, it's supposed to be respected by all.
Right.
And the world is saying no.
Right.
The world is saying no, not anymore. The world is saying we kill there too. And it causes and has caused and will continue to cause a certain fear. It's amazing to me. My church is located on a busy intersection, and the number of heads that turn when cars drive by, the number of heads that turn when somebody walks in the door, it's real. Even if we don't talk about it psychologically, it's happening. And so we're having a meeting tomorrow to talk about safety and security in the church. What's the role now? I've talked to several pastors about what are you doing for security? How are you training your people? There are active conversations about members carrying within the church, sanctioned and trained in the church by the church, because we have a real clear understanding that if you don't protect yourself, especially in light of some of the issues with police, and like I said, my father was in law enforcement, my grandfather was a sheriff. We understand the police have the right to protect and the placement to protect, but we also understand that when the gunman is outside, what do you do? And so this is it's a very scary time. It's a very scary reality, but one I think that we must have the discussion and we must prepare our people. We must prepare the congregation. You have to have people looking out for threat and danger, even if it never comes your way.
Right.
It would be irresponsible to admit, this is not going to happen. That would be irresponsible in this society.
When I look at, when I look at what happened in Texas, I look at Charleston, even when I look at Sandy Hook, we're speaking, I think, the day after or the day of the 5-year anniversary of Sandy Hook. It is repugnant on so many levels that our nation has gone down this path that we hold guns at such a high level that we're unwilling to go, we should probably do something about this. Unfortunately, a lot of the people, lawmakers especially, say we're not going to do anything because we want to have guns in the hands of the good guys so that they can protect themselves. And that's generally the response that's going to happen. As a Christ follower, though I want life, I have no reasonable expectation of it. And I say that because my Savior was murdered. He rose from the dead, but he was murdered, right? And so I have no reasonable expectation of it. I know that as a Christ follower, that when I gained the gospel, I got God and lost all of me. Mm-hmm. And I have to be okay with that. And that's hard. And every single time in Christian history, when they start attacking us, go back to Roman history, when they start attacking us, we grow. Go to China right now. Look at one of the fastest growing. Go to the global south where they're trying to oppress Christians. Every single time there's oppression of Christ followers, we explode. And so I use that as fodder to move forward, knowing that I see very clearly, and I always like it this way, when the people that are supposed to protect me choose not to, now I know where you stand. Okay, we can move forward now, right? And so they've chosen not to protect and do those things, that's fine. Now I can move forward with a clear understanding of who I am and where my church stands. And understand I have no reasonable expectation to expect you in this area to protect me. There's other areas I would expect them to protect me, but they choose not to. And because they choose not to, I choose to move forward knowing that God is my witness. He will protect me as much as he can, and when I die, I will be with him. Mm-hmm. And that's my goal in this time. And that's where I have to stand. In the words of Martin Luther, here I stand, I can do nothing less. Mm-hmm.
You know, even with this new assault on the church in America, this revived position of supremacy that's seemingly, slavery now reemerging in a modern day. Yeah. You're seeing things that you would have never thought you would see. And to me, that's really where the discussion becomes a place where we have to seek God and say, okay, what's our space here? What's our position in this modern time? I believe that you should have the freedom to live. Mm-hmm. I believe that. I believe that you have the right to live and to protect your family and your children and your loved ones, to do that in a way that is glorifying God and decent amongst men. I think that we can do that. What the price is and what the cost is for that, we're still trying to figure that out. Yeah. But while we're trying to figure that out, we still see people are dying, people are afraid, People are not coming to church for fear of these kinds of consequences. The day that happened, people were literally thinking, should I go to church? Church is dangerous. I'm safer watching church at home. I'm safer watching church on the internet. I don't need to go and be with y'all to be saved. You look at social media and Facebook, that was the discussion. You don't have to go to church to be a Christian. And so I ask questions like, does the church have to go underground? Is that the move? We know that that's happened in Africa. We know that that's happened in America. We know that some of those things have happened because of oppression. Where are we in history? And that's something that we as leaders and the conversation around the country, where is our placement in history as a church? And then what's our reasonable response to that placement?
I look forward to, as a church, coming together as a kainos. Greek word is one people. Ephesians 2 tells us that we're to be a kainos people. And that fight, what you're talking about, possibly augmenting what we do in our communities and our nation as a whole, is going to draw us together. And we find out very quickly. We'll find out very quickly who actually wants to live for Christ and who does not. We'll find that out right now with our lawmakers. And we'll understand that more clearly and understand how to move forward. And in the end, I think you've said it already, but our job is to live for His glory and our joy. And in that, we find everything.
Reverend Hendricks, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Yes, sir.
Nelson, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. We've had a conversation on the church, the black church in particular, the role it plays, the role it has played, and the role it will play. We hope that you take the time to contemplate where you stand, where you will stand. We'll see you next time. God bless.